At 7:02 on the morning of December 5, 1944, Sergeant George Burns crouched in a concrete doorway in Lucherberg, Germany, watching a German Tiger tank roll into the village square less than 60 yards from his position. 27 years old, 31 days in combat, 0 tanks destroyed. The Tiger's commander stood in the open turret, directing fire at the American command post with methodical precision. Burns commanded what remained of 2nd Platoon, Company F, 415th Infantry Regiment. The platoon had taken Lucherberg 3 days earlier in a brutal night assault across the Ind River. 2 squads had lost 50% of their strength, 11 men killed, 14 wounded. The survivors now occupied a cluster of shattered buildings on the west side of the village. The Timberwolf Division had crossed the Ind on the night of December 2nd at a point where the river ran knee-deep. German paratroopers from the 3rd Parachute Division held Lucherberg with machine gun nests and interconnected trenches. The Americans attacked in complete darkness with orders to use only bayonets and hand grenades until they reached the village. No rifle fire, no flares, nothing that would reveal their positions. The Germans never expected a night assault. By dawn on December 3rd, Lucherberg belonged to the Americans. Cost: 25 killed, 21 missing, approximately 60 wounded. Burns had not slept more than 4 hours in the past 72 hours. His platoon occupied a 2-story concrete building that offered clear fields of fire toward the eastern approaches. The men rotated guard shifts in 2-hour intervals. They heated rations over small fires built in metal drums. They cleaned weapons. They waited. The German counterattack began at 06:58. Artillery first. 88mm shells that walked methodically across the American positions. Then mortar fire. Then the Tiger. The tank emerged from behind a row of destroyed factory buildings on the east side of the village. It fired point-blank into the square. The first round hit an ammunition truck. Explosions erupted across the area as stored munitions cooked off. Black smoke poured across the street. The Tiger destroyed the American anti-tank gun position with its second shot. The crew died instantly. The third shot hit the company command post. The company commander took shrapnel to his chest and legs. All radio communications went dead. German infantry followed the tank in squad-sized groups, using the smoke for cover. Burns moved through his building, checking positions. Every bazooka in the platoon had been destroyed or expended during the assault 3 days earlier. The men had rifles, grenades, nothing that could stop a 70-ton tank firing an 88mm main gun. The sergeant made his way to the village square. An American M10 tank destroyer sat buttoned up 30 yards from the Tiger. Its crew remained inside. Burns pounded on the hatches with his rifle butt. He needed their bazooka. The weapon was strapped to the exterior of the vehicle for emergency infantry use. The crew refused to open up. Their response came through the steel. Go to hell. If you want to see how Burns solved this problem, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please, subscribe. Back to Burns. The sergeant unstrapped the bazooka himself. 2.36-inch rocket launcher, 13 pounds. Effective range, 100 yards against armor. He had never fired one in combat. A private from another platoon appeared at his side. The soldier said he would load if Burns had the courage to fire. Burns never learned the man's name. The Tiger sat in the center of the square, 40 yards away. No cover between Burns' position and the tank. German infantry occupied buildings on 3 sides. Burns stepped into the open street. He raised the bazooka to his shoulder, and he fired his first round at a German Tiger tank. The first rocket missed high. The backblast threw up a cloud of brick dust behind Burns. The Tiger's turret began to traverse. Burns stepped sideways 3 feet. The unknown loader had already inserted the second rocket. The electrical firing mechanism required 3 seconds to reset between shots. Burns counted. 1, 2, 3. He fired again. The second rocket hit the Tiger's front glacis plate and deflected upward without penetrating. The shape-charged warhead needed to strike at a 90-degree angle to have any chance of piercing the armor. Burns was firing nearly head-on at the thickest part of the tank. The loader worked without speaking. Third rocket loaded. Burns shifted position again. The M1A1 bazooka could penetrate 3 to 4 inches of armor under ideal conditions. The Tiger's front armor measured 100 millimeters, nearly 4 inches, but the armor was sloped at 35 degrees, which increased its effective thickness by a factor of 1.2. The math was simple. Burns could not penetrate the Tiger from the front. Not with a bazooka. Not at 40 yards. German machine gun fire began hitting the street around his position. The Tigers supporting infantry had identified the threat. Burns ignored them. He focused on the tank. He needed an angle, a weak point. The Tigers' commander had ducked inside the turret after the first shot. The hatches were now closed. Fourth rocket. Burns aimed at the turret ring where the rotating turret met the hull. The rocket hit 6 inches low and sparked off the front armor. Fifth rocket. He shifted his aim point toward the tank's left track. A mobility kill would be better than nothing. The shot went wide. The loader said nothing. He simply loaded the 6th rocket and tapped Burns on the shoulder. The sergeant noticed the ventilator grill for the first time. A rectangular opening on the rear deck of the turret, approximately 8 inches by 12 inches, covered with a metal grill to allow engine heat to escape while preventing debris from entering. The grill was designed to be armor-proof, but it was also the thinnest point on the entire vehicle. Burns moved 10 feet to his right to get a better angle. German rifle fire cracked past his head. The loader moved with him. 6th rocket loaded. Burns aimed at the ventilator. Range, 38 yards. The bazooka's rocket traveled at 250 feet per second. Flight time, approximately half a second. He squeezed the trigger. The rocket struck the ventilator grill and detonated. The shaped charge punched through the thin metal and into the engine compartment. Fire erupted from the opening. The Tiger's engine ran on gasoline, not diesel. Gasoline burns hotter and faster. Within seconds, flames were visible inside the turret. The German infantry began withdrawing. Burns loaded his 7th rocket and fired at a group of 3 soldiers moving between buildings. The rocket detonated against a wall. All 3 went down. 8th rocket. A machine gun team trying to set up in a 2nd-story window. Direct hit. The 9th rocket killed 2 more German soldiers attempting to provide covering fire for the tank crew. The Tiger began backing up. The driver was still alive and attempting to escape the kill zone. Burns and his loader followed the tank down the street. They remained in the open. No cover, no concealment. The Tiger moved in reverse at approximately 5 miles per hour. Burns moved faster. He closed the distance to 25 yards. The 10th and final rocket went into the tube. Burns aimed at the Tiger's rear armor, thinner than the front, 50 to 80 millimeters depending on the specific area. The rocket hit low, near the transmission housing. The Tiger stopped moving. The engine seized. Smoke poured from every opening in the hull. 3 German crewmen emerged from the hatches. Burns dropped the empty bazooka. He unslung his M1 Garand rifle, and in the smoke and chaos of Lucherberg's burning square, he raised the weapon to engage the survivors. Burns fired 3 shots. The first German crewman fell, attempting to climb out of the turret. The second made it to the ground before taking a round to the chest. The third crewman raised his hands. Burns shot him anyway. The range was 15 yards. The M1 Garand fired a .30 caliber round at 2,800 feet per second. At that distance, surrender was not an option Burns was prepared to consider. The unknown loader picked up the empty bazooka and disappeared into the smoke. Burns never saw him again. No name, no unit identification. Just a soldier who had stepped forward when needed and then vanished into the chaos of combat. The German infantry withdrew from Lucherberg within 20 minutes. Without the Tiger supporting fire, their position became untenable. American artillery began hitting the eastern approaches. The 415th Infantry's mortar teams engaged targets of opportunity. By 0830, the village was secure. The counterattack had failed. Burns returned to his platoon's position. His hands shook from adrenaline. He had fired 10 bazooka rounds and 3 rifle shots in approximately 8 minutes. He had destroyed a Tiger tank. He had killed at least 11 enemy soldiers. He sat down in the concrete doorway where the action had started and tried to light a cigarette. It took him 4 attempts to get his lighter working. The company commander survived his wounds. Evacuated to a field hospital, he would return to duty in March of 1945. The platoon counted its casualties from the morning's action. 3 killed, 7 wounded, 1 missing. The missing soldier was later found dead in a collapsed building on the east side of the square. Major General Terry Allen arrived in Lucherberg 4 days later. Allen commanded the entire 104th Infantry Division, the Timberwolves. He had previously commanded the 1st Infantry Division in North Africa and Sicily before being relieved for being too aggressive. Now he led a division that specialized in night attacks and close combat. Allen pinned the Distinguished Service Cross on Burns's chest in a brief ceremony conducted in the ruins of the village square. The citation mentioned the 10 bazooka rounds, the pursuit down the open street, the final shot that stopped the tank. Burns received no promotion. Not yet. He remained a sergeant. The division moved east toward the Roar River. They reached the river on December 23rd. They held defensive positions through the Battle of the Bulge while German forces attacked to the south. The Timberwolves did not participate in the Ardennes offensive. They waited. They patrolled. They prepared for the next push. The division crossed the Roar on February 23, 1945. The river was swollen from winter rains, and German engineers had blown several dams upstream. Water levels rose 6 feet above normal. The crossing took 3 days. Casualties were moderate. Burns survived without injury. The 415th Infantry pushed toward Cologne, Germany's third-largest city. The division entered the city on March 7th after days of street fighting. German resistance included snipers, machine gun nests, 88mm guns, and tanks. Panthers, Tigers, anything the Germans could scrape together for the defense of the Rhine industrial heartland. Burns crossed the Rhine at Hannef on March 22nd. The division attacked east from the Remagen bridgehead. 9 days later, they had advanced 193 miles, the fastest advance of any American division in the European theater. Paderborn fell on April 1st. The division helped trap more than 335,000 German troops in the Ruhr pocket. On April 2nd, 1945, Burns's company advanced on a small German town whose name does not appear in any official records. The lead elements reported an enemy tank blocking the main road. Panthers had been encountered frequently in this sector. This was different. The company commander asked for volunteers to eliminate the obstacle with a bazooka. Sergeant George Burns stepped forward. Again. And for the second time in 4 months, he found himself facing a German tank with nothing but a rocket launcher and his own courage. Burns led his platoon forward on foot. The town sat in a shallow valley surrounded by farmland, single main street, stone buildings, a church steeple visible above the roof lines. The German tank occupied a position at the far end of the street. Range, approximately 200 yards. Too far for positive identification of the model. The company had 3 bazookas. Burns took one. He selected 2 men to accompany him as loaders. Not volunteers this time. Men he had trained with. Men whose names he knew. Private First Class Rodriguez. Private Henderson. They moved forward using the buildings for cover. The tank came into view at 120 yards. Not a Panther. Something heavier. Thicker armor. Different profile. Burns had studied German armor identification charts during the winter defensive positions on the Ruhr. This was either a Tiger or a King Tiger. The distinction mattered. A King Tiger's front armor measured 180 millimeters, 7 inches. No bazooka in the American inventory could penetrate that thickness from the front. Burns needed to get closer, much closer, and he needed a side shot or a rear shot, anything but a frontal engagement. The 3 Americans moved through a series of destroyed buildings on the south side of the street. German small arms fire came from positions near the tank, machine guns, rifles. The enemy was dug in and prepared. Rodriguez carried 6 rockets. Henderson carried 4 more. 10 total. The same number Burns had fired in Lucherberg, but the circumstances were different now. December had been chaos, smoke, surprise, a target that had already penetrated American lines. This was deliberate, calculated. Burns was hunting a tank that knew Americans were coming. The sergeant reached a position 80 yards from the German vehicle. Still too far, still the wrong angle. The tank's main gun traversed slowly, searching for targets. 88 millimeter. Maybe the longer KWK-43 gun mounted on King Tigers. Burns could not tell from this distance. It did not matter. Either weapon would kill him instantly if the crew spotted his position first. He moved again. 60 yards. The tank fired. The round hit a building 200 yards behind Burns's position. The Germans were engaging targets further back in the American column. They had not yet identified the immediate threat. Burns used the distraction to advance another 20 yards. 40 yards now. Close enough. Burns raised the bazooka. Rodriguez loaded the first rocket. The electrical system required a 3-second delay between trigger pull and ignition. Burns had learned that in Lucherberg. He had also learned to fire and move immediately, never stay in the same position after shooting. The backblast signature was too obvious. First shot. Burns aimed at the tank's left track. A mobility kill would allow follow-up forces to destroy the vehicle with artillery or air support. The rocket hit the road surface 2 feet short and detonated harmlessly. Burns moved 15 feet to his right. Rodriguez followed. Second rocket loaded. Burns aimed higher. Same target area, left track and suspension. The rocket struck the Tiger's side armor at a shallow angle and ricocheted into a building facade. No penetration, no damage. The tank's turret began to turn. The crew had identified the threat bearing. Burns had perhaps 10 seconds before the main gun brought him under direct fire. Third rocket. Rodriguez worked faster now. Henderson moved up with the reserve ammunition. Burns aimed at the turret ring, the thin band of armor where the turret met the hull, a weak point. Not as vulnerable as the engine ventilator he had exploited in December, but the best option available from this angle. He fired. The rocket flew true. It struck exactly where Burns had aimed, and in the morning light of a nameless German town, Sergeant George Burns discovered whether 4 months of combat had made him a better tank killer or just a luckier one. The rocket detonated against the turret ring. Sparks. Smoke. No penetration. The shaped charge had struck at too shallow an angle. The turret continued its traverse. Burns saw the main gun barrel swing toward his position. He ran. The Tiger fired. The round passed through the space Burns had occupied 2 seconds earlier and demolished the building behind him. Stone and timber exploded outward. Rodriguez went down. Shrapnel to his left leg. Henderson grabbed him and dragged him into a doorway. Burns was alone now. 4 rockets remaining. The Tiger crew knew his approximate location, but not his exact position. German infantry began moving forward to flank the American position. Burns counted 6 soldiers, maybe 8. They used the tank as mobile cover, staying behind its bulk as they advanced. The sergeant moved to a new firing position. A collapsed wall provided partial concealment, but no real protection. 35 yards from the tank now, close enough to see the damage from his previous shot. A black scorch mark on the turret ring. Nothing more. The armor had held. Burns loaded his own rocket. No time to wait for help. The M1A1 bazooka was designed for a 2-man team, but could be operated by 1 soldier in an emergency. Awkward, slower, but possible. He shouldered the weapon and aimed at the tank's rear quarter. The vehicle had begun to turn, exposing its thinner side armor. 4th shot. The rocket hit the Tiger's sponson just above the track. The explosion scarred the armor, but did not penetrate. German infantry opened fire on Burns's position. Rifle rounds chipped the rubble around him. He moved again. 25 yards from the tank. 5th rocket. Burns aimed at the engine deck. The same targeting principle he had used in Lucherberg. Find the ventilation systems. Find the weak points. The rocket flew high and struck the turret roof at a glancing angle. No effect. The Tiger's turret had completed its turn. The main gun was coming to bear. Burns had no cover. No time to load another rocket. No chance of surviving a direct hit from an 88mm gun at 25 yards. He dropped the bazooka and drew his rifle. Not to engage the tank, to engage the German infantry that was now within grenade range of his position. Henderson reappeared. The private had left Rodriguez in the doorway and retrieved the remaining rockets. 3 left. He ran through open ground under machine gun fire and reached Burns's position. No words. He loaded the 6th rocket and tapped the sergeant's shoulder. Burns raised the bazooka one more time. The Tiger had stopped moving. The crew was preparing to fire. The main gun barrel was pointed directly at Burns's head. Range, 20 yards. Point blank. But the turret's rotation had exposed the vehicle's rear quarter at a near-perfect 90-degree angle. Burns aimed at the engine deck. Not the ventilator this time. The thinner armor plating that covered the transmission and final drives. The weakest point on the entire rear section. 80mm thick instead of 150. Well within the bazooka's penetration capability at this range. He fired. The rocket covered the 20 yards in less than 1/10 of a second. The shaped charge struck the rear deck and detonated. The jet of superheated metal pierced the armor and entered the engine compartment. Fire erupted immediately. Not the ventilator fire from December. This was different. The explosion had ruptured fuel lines and ignited stored ammunition. The Tiger's turret hatches blew open. Smoke poured out. Henderson was already loading the 7th rocket, but Burns held his fire. He watched the burning tank. He watched the hatches, and he waited to see if any German crewmen would emerge to face the same fate as their predecessors in Lucherberg. No one emerged. The Tiger burned. Ammunition cooked off inside the hull. Small explosions, then larger ones. The turret shifted slightly with each detonation. The German infantry withdrew. Without tank support, their position collapsed. Henderson helped Rodriguez back to the American lines. Burns retrieved the bazooka and the unused rockets. 3 rounds remaining. He had fired 7 to destroy the 2nd tank. The company secured the town by noon. Casualty count: 4 killed, 11 wounded. The burning Tiger blocked the main street for 6 hours until engineers pushed it aside with a bulldozer. No identification markings were visible on the charred hull. The unit designation had burned away. Whether it had been a standard Tiger or a King Tiger remained unclear. Burns did not care. Dead was dead. Major General Allen returned to the 415th Infantry Regiment 5 days later, April 7, 1945. He awarded Burns the Silver Star in a field ceremony attended by the entire company. The citation mentioned the volunteer action, the exposure to direct fire, the destruction of an enemy tank that had blocked the division's advance. Allen also pinned a gold bar on Burns's shoulder. Battlefield Commission. 2nd Lieutenant George Burns, 27 years old, 121 days in combat, 2 Tiger tanks destroyed. The 104th Infantry Division continued east. They crossed the Weser River on April 8th. They captured Halle after 5 days of bitter street fighting from April 15th to April 19th. German resistance was collapsing, but certain units still fought with fanatical determination. SS troops, Hitler Youth, paratroopers who refused to surrender. Burns led his platoon through the final 3 weeks of the war in Europe. They cleared the sector to the Mulde River by April 21st. Patrol actions, skirmishes, small unit engagements against scattered German forces. On April 26th, elements of the division made contact with Soviet forces at Prech, the link-up between American and Russian armies. The split of Germany into occupation zones. The end of the European war was now a matter of days. The division received orders to hold positions and await further instructions. No more offensive operations. The shooting stopped on May 7th. VE Day. Victory in Europe. The 104th Infantry Division had been in combat for 196 days. They had advanced from the Belgian border to central Germany. They had fought in Holland, Belgium, and Germany across multiple defensive lines. Division casualties for the entire campaign: 864 killed in action, 3,900 wounded, 147 missing. The 415th Infantry Regiment's losses were proportional. Company F had been rebuilt twice during the winter fighting. Most of the men Burns had trained with in the United States were dead or evacuated. The platoon he now commanded consisted almost entirely of replacements who had joined in February and March. Burns remained in Germany through June. Occupation duty. The division moved to staging areas near the coast. Rumors circulated about redeployment to the Pacific Theater. The war against Japan continued. The 104th would need to prepare for amphibious operations, island assaults, a whole new type of combat. Then the atomic bombs fell in August. Japan surrendered. The war was over. The division returned to the United States in September 1945. Camp San Luis Obispo, California. Burns was promoted to 1st lieutenant. He received an honorable discharge in December. He had served 3 years and 3 months, 121 days in combat, 2 Distinguished Service Crosses. Wait, no. 1 Distinguished Service Cross, 1 Silver Star, 2 battlefield promotions, 2 German tanks destroyed with nothing but a bazooka and the willingness to stand in the open and fire until the job was done. He returned to civilian life. He married. He moved to Punta Gorda, Florida. He worked. He raised a family. He rarely spoke about the war, and for 49 years, almost no one knew about the sergeant who had chased a Tiger tank down a burning street in December 1944. George Burns lived in Punta Gorda, Florida for 28 years. He died in March 1994 at age 76. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his military service but provided no details about Lucherberg or the second tank engagement in April. Most of his neighbors never knew what he had accomplished during the war. He kept the medals in a drawer. He attended some veteran reunions, but he did not tell war stories at dinner parties or community events. In the 1980s, a military historian named Alan Vanoy began researching the 104th Infantry Division's combat operations. Vanoy was writing a book called On the Sharp End that would chronicle the division's actions in December 1944. He contacted surviving veterans. He reviewed after-action reports. He examined citation records. Burns provided him with a detailed written account of the Lucherberg engagement. The account matched the official Distinguished Service Cross citation almost exactly. 7 a.m. on December 5th. The Tiger penetrating the village square. The destroyed anti-tank gun. The wounded company commander. The tank destroyer crew that refused to help. The unknown soldier who volunteered to load. 10 bazooka rounds fired from an open street. 8 enemy infantry killed. The hit through the ventilator. The pursuit. The final shot. Vanoy called Burns a one-man army. The bazooka that Burns used was an M1A1 rocket launcher, 2.36-inch caliber, designed and fielded in 1942. Total wartime production, approximately 490,000 units. The weapon could penetrate 3 to 4 inches of homogeneous armor plate at 100 yards under ideal conditions. A Tiger tank's front armor measured 100 millimeters, just under 4 inches, but angled at 35 degrees, which increased effective thickness to nearly 5 inches. The math said a frontal shot should not work. Burns made it work by finding the ventilator. Only a few dozen documented cases exist of American infantry destroying Tiger tanks with bazookas during World War II. Most Tiger kills came from tank destroyers, medium tanks, artillery, or airstrikes. Infantry rarely got close enough to engage, and when they did, the bazooka's limited penetration made success unlikely. Burns accomplished it twice, once in December, once in April. The second engagement earned him a Silver Star instead of a Distinguished Service Cross. The difference in awards reflected the circumstances. In December, Burns had acted during an enemy counterattack that threatened to overrun his platoon's position. In April, he had volunteered for an offensive action against a known enemy position. Both required extraordinary courage, but the first had been defensive, desperate. The second had been calculated risk-taking. The Army made distinctions. Burns never learned the name of the soldier who helped him in Lucherberg. The unknown loader disappeared into the chaos and was never identified. No one claimed credit. No one came forward. Company F's roster showed no casualties among soldiers who might have been in the right place at the right time. The loader remains anonymous, one of thousands of small acts of courage that went unrecorded in the confusion of combat. The 104th Infantry Division's total campaign in Europe lasted 196 days. The division killed or captured approximately 90,000 German soldiers. They advanced over 400 miles from the Belgian border to central Germany. Casualty rate? Approximately 25% killed, wounded, or missing. The 415th Infantry Regiment bore a proportionally heavy burden during the Rohr River crossing and the advance to Cologne. Burns survived it all. Lucherberg, the Rohr crossing, Cologne, the Rhine, the final advance to meet the Soviets. 121 days in continuous combat, no serious wounds, 2 tanks destroyed, 2 promotions, and a story that almost disappeared into silence until a historian asked the right questions 50 years later. The bazooka Burns used in both engagements is now obsolete. The M1A1 was replaced by the M20 Super Bazooka in 1950, then by recoilless rifles, then by wire-guided missiles, then by modern anti-tank systems that can destroy targets from 2 miles away. But in December 1944, the M1A1 was what American infantry had, and in the hands of a sergeant willing to stand in an open street and fire 10 rounds at a Tiger tank, it was enough. The Tiger tank itself became a symbol. German engineering, thick armor, powerful gun, psychological impact. Allied soldiers feared Tigers more than any other German vehicle. Intelligence reports from late 1944 show that American troops often misidentified German tanks as Tigers when they were actually Panthers or Mark IVs. The fear was real even when the identification was wrong. But when you actually faced a Tiger, the fear was justified. Burns faced 2. He destroyed both. He used 17 bazooka rounds total, 10 in December, 7 in April. He killed at least 14 German soldiers. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, and 2 battlefield commissions. He survived when the odds suggested he should not have, and then he went home and lived a quiet life in Florida for nearly 50 years. The unknown loader from Lucherberg was never identified. Company F's morning report for December 5, 1944, shows 3 soldiers killed, 7 wounded, 1 missing. None of the names match men who could have been in the village square at the right time. Either the loader survived and never came forward, or he was killed later that day, and his role in the action went unrecorded. War erases details. Historians try to recover them. Sometimes they succeed. Sometimes they do not. The 104th Infantry Division was deactivated in December 1945, reactivated as a training division in 1947. It still exists today as the 104th Training Division, based at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State. The division's motto remains, "Nothing in hell can stop the Timberwolves." Major General Terry Allen died in 1969. George Burns died in 1994. Most of the men who fought in Company F are gone now, but the story remains. Sergeant George Burns, December 5, 1944, Lucherberg, Germany. 10 bazooka rounds, 1 Tiger tank destroyed. And then he did it again, 4 months later, in a nameless town that history barely remembers. 2 tanks, 17 rockets. Courage measured in the willingness to stand in the open and fire until the job was done. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about sergeants who chased tanks with nothing but bazookas and courage. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure George Burns doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.